On a sneeze. Maybe not. In any case, we're live here to chat about the television, movies, etc. that we've watched / consumed the last 2 weeks. And I sound like I'm sick because guess what, guys? I'm sick. I got a little bit of a cold over Memorial Day weekend. It's okay. We're going to make it through. The plague can't take down a bad bitch. I'm going to be all right. Kate, welcome. How was your Memorial Day weekend? Kate is either on mute or on a delay. Kate, hello. Kate, we cannot hear you, but I could hear you earlier, so I don't know what's wrong.
How about now?
Yes, there you are. Hey, Kate.
Okay. Hey. Yeah. Just this weekend, I just got ready for school to start. Yay. Summer classes.
Fun.
Mm-hmm.
Are you taking anything fun this summer?
I'm starting senior design.
Exciting. Well, Kate, I am going to toss it to you to start us off because one of the things getting me through the plague I'm currently experiencing is Kate has provided some quality content in terms of trailers and news announcements in the past few days, and I would love for her to share this with you. So go ahead.
Okay, so I saw several movie trailers and other announcements made throughout the past 2 weeks. One was, which is probably the one I'm actually most excited about, is called The Mysterious Benedict Society. It is actually based on like some upper middle grade, like younger YA novels. It's supposed to follow this group of 4 kids as they go. They join kind of the secret society, and they help this guy try to save the world in all essentials. I saw the trailer and I immediately read the first book. It is one of the few 5-star books I've read this year, one of my favorites.
Oh, wow.
It
Okay.
was great. Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I'm a little biased. There's a character named Kate, and I just related to her on an emotional and psychological level. It was really unseen, unheard of levels. So there was that. It was fun. The next one I saw also really sounds fun and interesting. It's called Gunpowder Milkshake.
Okay.
I don't know as much about this one other than it's kind of like a strange mother-daughter duo team up to save this little girl. And they're assassins, I think, and they kind of have to deal with the dueling agencies of assassins. And I do know they work with an agency now called the Librarians, and they store their weaponry in the novels of classic female authors.
Love
I mean,
this.
Jane Austen starting off, obviously. So then there is Last Night in Soho. I don't know much about that other than it's a thriller that kind of is very much 50s or 60s inspired, and it stars Anya Taylor-Joy. There we go. I got it. And then there's another one. I think it's actually a TV show, but it's going to star Selena Gomez, called Only Murders in the Building, or Only Murders in the Building. And it looks kind of like a murder comedy. It's got a lot of different, really classic comedians of all these different eras in it, from what I could tell. And then in production currently, there's a new period drama being filmed. I don't know, like the few things I've seen, I think it's like the 1940s, but I could be wrong on that one. And it stars like tons of A-list stars like Anya Taylor-Joy, Christian Bale, Taylor Swift's in it, Robert De Niro's in it. So that one looks interesting.
That's going to be
Also,
a
that
blockbuster.
yeah, that's gonna be amazing. I mean, honestly, we've been calling it for a year. The next era of movies has to be
Yeah.
period dramas, and I feel like we just need the credit for this. Like somebody
Yeah.
just needs to go,
This is
yeah, it was
us.
Kate and
This is
Ken.
us.
This is our idea.
Yep.
The show I had mentioned a few weeks ago, Jupiter's Legacy, I think just didn't catch off, and it's not going to be canceled. But it looks like they're actually going to kind of take some of that and either spin it off into a different show that's still going to be about superheroes or something like that. I just recently saw about this, so I didn't really get time to research what it was actually about. So that's all the news I have this week.
This is probably the best news week / lineup we've had in months. I'm thrilled about all of these, and they're all very different. Like, you have the blockbuster one that we were referencing, that like I feel like everybody's gonna watch that. It has at least somebody for somebody, right? And then excuse me, you have like the Selena Gomez murder comedy, which is like very niche to my interest and probably won't have everybody ever watching it, but like I'm gonna watch it. And then Anya
Yeah,
Taylor-Joy, who is the moment right now, like just
yeah.
some top-notch stuff. I will add a not top-notch news item.
Okay.
The Bachelorette starts next week. And Bachelor in Paradise starts filming soon, which is basically where all of the Bachelor and Bachelorette rejects all get together and pair up for money. That starts filming soon, and apparently they're going to have celebrity hosts, including David Spade, who last I checked was like an illusionist or magician. None of this makes sense to me, but I'm gonna watch it anyways, obviously.
I mean, that franchise in general makes no sense to me, so
Yeah.
I can't really defend anything about it, but that's extra weird.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what they're doing with having celebrity guests on their Bachelor Rejects show, but maybe they're just catering to my interest once again because I'm interested. Judging, but interested. Well, Kate, it is with great regret that I let you know I put This Is Us in the thumbnail for this week because I just wanted to, to use office terminology, just fully close the loop on this moment, on this storyline that I've been complaining about. And I just want to get it out of the way so we can move on to better and brighter. Carrie's in the chat. He has asked if we're going to go full spoilers on A Quiet Place 2. No, I actually, this is kind of funny. I haven't actually seen A Quiet Place 1. I just watched A Quiet Place 2 after like reading all the plot points from A Quiet Place 1 because my brother wanted to see it. So we just went and saw it this weekend. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about my thoughts on that, but I won't go full spoilers. But we'll save the Quiet Place bit to the end. So what I want to do is just kind of close the loop quickly on This Is Us the storyline and complain about Kevin until I die in a coughing fit. Then I'm going to toss it to Kate, who will go over the much more prestigious things she's watched this week. And then I will briefly close the loop on Married at First Sight as well. Another one that I let fall by the wayside because I wanted to wait and see where we landed. We know where we landed. The finale was this week. And then we'll talk about Quiet Place at the end. So, without further ado, let me tell you how Kevin Pearson somehow made it worse. Okay. The lovely, absolutely gorgeous woman that you see in the thumbnail, Madison, who's far too good for him, and I don't ship them at all, has just recently had his 2 twin newborns. They got engaged to be married after he pushed for them to be engaged to be married. She's in love with him, but she was not the one pushing for this. He was the one super pushing for this. Then he was the one I'm already gonna die in a coughing fit. He was the one turning into like a groomzilla and had to have this, you know, he wanted a perfect wedding, he wanted it to go a certain way, he wanted it big, she wanted it small. Like this whole thing has been like his deal, okay? She has like some traumatic baggage where like her mom and dad did not love each other. Her mom abandoned them. Her dad was an asshole who was just sort of like, love doesn't exist, you know, don't even worry about that, whatever. And she has always wanted to like marry for love. And she, even though she was kind of, you know, not the one pushing for this, she felt comfortable marrying for love because she did love Kevin. Like she was in love with him. So on the wedding day, where Kevin is being waited on hand and foot, by the way, like everything's being done for him. He is super, super rich. He has all his family there supporting him. Like, there's no reason for him to be freaking out. And he's like freaking out because he's like, he's just like, I'm not gonna go like full astrology hoe on you, but he's like a Pisces man where he's just like super obsessed with his own thoughts and feelings and has no like ability or interest to like read the room or care about anybody else. Anyway, she's having like a bit of an emotional moment. Her family won't even come to the wedding. Like her dad and mom were supposed to come and like they're not there, whatever. And she, in a moment of vulnerability, just wants to hear from him that he loves her or is in love with her. She asks him on their wedding day, "Are you in love with me?" After he's been pushing for this entire time, he won't tell her that he's in love with her. They call the wedding off instead of him just saying that he's in love with her. The mother of his children, the mother of his infant newborn twins, who he was pushing to get married, who is way out of his league. They called, like, that's the finale. They call off the wedding because he won't say he's in love with her. When I tell you first of all, there's just like a few things that I dislike that are just like logistic things that are annoying. I don't like whether it's storylines, real life, whatever. The logistics of calling off a wedding are so selfish. I'm so sorry if I sound judgmental. It's because I'm judgmental. Calling off a wedding is so selfish to literally everybody involved. Could you not have gone to therapy first? Could you not have like worked this out in advance? Do you really have to have this like come to Jesus moment day of your wedding? Like these storylines make me despise everybody involved in it. Like people are people are traveling, people paid for plane tickets, people took off work. Like the idea of doing that just enrages me, first of all, regardless of who it was. I'm telling you, it could be a ship that I actively dislike. And if they're like calling it off at the wedding, I'm thinking less of them because that's so so there's that. But then there's also like, am I a cold, heartless bitch for thinking like it's kind of not too much to ask him to say that he's in love with her, even if he's like, maybe he's a sociopath. I don't know. Like, even if he doesn't have those feelings, I feel like, is it too much to ask for him to just say it? Like, am I being demanding? Let me know.
I, having no like actual context of the show, will go ahead and tell you a couple of things about how I feel about this.
Okay.
I see your point, and I fully agree. In 99% of the situations, I think it's very selfish for you to get to the last minute and then wait to ask him such a make or break question. Like, it's not her fault, but like if she was gonna do that, don't wait to the last minute. Mm-hmm. Like I said, not her fault, but also don't wait to the last minute. But at the same time, in a storytelling thing, I get they do that for the drama of it all. They also do it. I can at least give them the applause that if he was gonna, if he lied and said he was in love with her and they got married out of a lie, that's not any better. It's just that they shouldn't have been getting married in the first place. Or at least if they were going to get married, they needed to have a situation much like what we were talking about, like The Crown, and have an understanding that they're not head over heels in love with each other. They're doing this because they think it's what's best for their, future lives. Things they didn't do in The Crown, things apparently they haven't done here. So they just needed to talk more. And I agree it's selfish that they cancel the wedding because it's really expensive for everybody.
Like, okay, I get that it's kind of chaotic of her to like ask this day of, okay? But I'm going to cut her some slack and not cut him some slack cuz I am who I am. With her, like
Fair.
she is in this like it's kind of a high stress wedding because it was kind of a fast wedding and she has just had his babies like I think just months ago, like this has all been kind of a whirlwind and she comes from a space of romantic baggage whereas he comes from a family where like everybody loves each other and his siblings are married and are in loving marriages, blah blah blah, right? So for her, she just wanted that reassurance and was kind of, she wasn't having cold feet. She was just kind of having these concerns. Like, just want to super make sure I'm marrying for love. And she knew that she loved him. I just feel as if, like, I'm going to say, like, if he thinks that there's, okay, he seems to behave as if, like, he thinks there might be, like, something wrong with him. Like, he just can't generate, whatever. If that's the case, I just feel like it's not a matter of lying. It's like, there's like a quote that I was trying to remember and I can't really think of, but basically it's like if you don't feel like doing the right thing, just act like you do. Like even if he's not like feeling whatever feelings in those moments, he has made reckless choices with her life, not the least of which are the child and the fact that they're about to have this like like he's a celebrity as well, so it's also like a big public celebrity wedding. They're about to have this big public celebrity wedding. Even if he doesn't like feel in love with her, air quotes in this fictional sense, I feel like it would have looked better for him to have just said that he did. Like, even if it was a lie, I feel like that would endear the viewer to him more.
I see where you're coming from. I think for me, I'm just always going to be on the side of like, there is a wrong party here. It is very much her. Like we all agree on this. And like I said, like, I think she should have asked that question beforehand. But I also agree. It's not really. I'm not going to harp on her because I'm just not. Um, but like, the whole situation itself, it sucks. And the writers wrote themselves into a corner, and they
Yeah.
chose this way because it was the most dramatic and shocking, rather than the most endearing of everybody. Because, like, from how you describe this character, it would take a lot to actually truly endear him to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at this point they probably would pick endearing Maddie to the audience over him, which is not hard apparently.
Right.
But I think having them call off the wedding, like anything like that, I guess if you were going to endear somebody, the audience to Maddie, he would have said that because then you would be like he was lying.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. The whole situation's just messy, and I feel
I
like
think
by
it
the
would
time you get to
endear
this point in the writing,
both. It would endear the audience to both of them for him to just go through with it and say it because it endears us to her that she is sort of this like victim in this situation that she wants so badly to be like in a love-based marriage and we as the audience are not sure that she is, and it would endear us to him because we see he's actually capable of doing something that is not self-obsessed, and he's not, like, he didn't do that, but it just makes it frustrating because end of the episode is this like happy feel good, like his family circling around him being like, you do the right thing, not lying, whatever, blah blah blah. His mom's like, I would marry all of you, which is just like weird, but whatever. Like they have all this reassurance for him at the end, none for her, as if we're supposed to give a shit about him. Like, jumping in the chat real quick to back us up. Carrie says, sounds like Madison dodged a bullet. And he adds, ooh, this is a good question. Bigger life query. Can or should you marry someone if you love them but are not in love with them? That is a very interesting ship question, both as you're saying, like bigger life, like real life, but most importantly in fictional senses. Fictional senses, what does it do to the audience's perception of the character? Stormy says, I'm proud of Madison. She deserves better than Kevin. I don't root for Kevin at all. Strongly with you. She says, if I'm being honest, Randall, Beth, and their kids are the only ones I root for. Also agree, I'm not rooting for Kate and Toby. I'm thrilled that in the flash forwards, it looks like Kate and Toby have divorced. And I don't know what's going on with this apparent wedding with Kate and British guy in the future, but something about it already gives me bad vibes. So I just don't think I'm going to get invested in literally any siblings romance except for Beth and Randall. However, I do treat them all as like these interesting case studies, and I see them do things with Kate where previously she drove me up the wall, and now with Kate, they have done things to at least give her some positive characteristics to where she can be endearing to the audience, complex to the audience, frustrating to the audience. She can be a more dynamic person. I feel like with Kevin, I'm going crazy because I feel like I'm watching something that's like a villain origin story, but all we're seeing is everybody like constantly reassure and support him. So with that, also Stormy says, for me, I need to be in love to marry someone. Okay, so for real life, we got to vote for being in love. So fictional sense, and then we could throw in some real life spice as well. Fictional sense, would you want to see a fictional ship get together, get married, if they have said like I love you, whatever, but they're not in love with you? Because I think, yeah, that does come into play as well when we talk about Married at First Sight in the next segment.
You know, that's a very multidimensional question. It's a very good question, but there's a lot of layers to it because I mean, I have read and watched my good fair share of Regency that are more like family friends, like it just makes sense and they get married and they love each other because they're friends, but it's not until they've been married for many years that they're in love with each other,
Mm-hmm.
which I fully support those stories. Those are fun. It's a hard question to give a definitive answer to because there's so many options like in scenarios where I would pick one or the other because there's almost a level of like I've seen ones where it's like a love triangle and you pick your like longtime best friend that you love but you're not in love with versus the new charming suave guy that you don't know for you haven't known for very long but you're in love with and
Cough,
there's
shadow
an
and
interest.
bone, cough.
I didn't mean for that. I was actually thinking of something else, but fair point. Uh, um, I was thinking, I just, I keep thinking about Downton Abbey for some reason. Maybe because I just got put back on Netflix, but I don't know. There's so many options. There's good on either side. I think that I rooted for, so it's hard for me to pick fiction wise.
I think it would be hypocritical of me to directly after this start talking about Married at First Sight and the fact that I genuinely, in the right context, think arranged marriages are interesting and can be positive. It would be hypocritical of me to have that stance and not have the stance that, yes, fictional, whatever, you can, like, it's totally fine to marry somebody that you love but are not in love with. Like, you are committed to the act of loving them, but you are not in love with them, because I've seen that work on like Married at First Sight. I've seen that work in like, in a fictional sense. I love arranged marriage, marriage of convenience, arranged marriage, whatever. I love that trope in any book, movie, whatever. Marriage of political alliance, like all of those. Therefore, I have to take the stance that like a marriage between two characters who are not necessarily both like madly in love can still turn out awesome, right? Like there's too many books proving otherwise. With that said, it certainly seems like the non-ideal situation. I, as the viewer, am unconvinced that Kevin can love or be in love. So I can't root for that if I'm not sure it's possible. I then have to root for like what works to make this character palatable for me on screen, and if he is committed to the act of loving, caring for whatever his, you know, wife and the mother of his two children, that adds enough positives to where I can start like, okay, I'm watching this, I'm rooting for something to happen. I'm rooting for him to become a more complex character and not just one-dimensionally annoying. Carrie
I
says, isn't loving someone a more reliable state than being in love? I would like, if you're talking in a real life sense, I would say yes, but being in
yeah, I
love is a
was
more entertaining state for fiction.
well, and I was gonna say like one does not necessarily preclude the other. I think the best answer we could possibly go with is you can marry someone you're in love with, but make sure you love them as a person. You are committed to the love before all else, because sometimes you can fall out of that passionate love and it still be like you care enough to try and put in that like commitment to always be there and put the other first. That's my answer.
That's such a good answer. Stormy says Kevin is the Barry Allen of This Is Us. Well, Stormy, that
Man, she's not wrong.
transitions us well to a little DC announcement. Next week, Carrie's going to be joining us, and we're going to be talking all DC shows. You're going to notice them conspicuously absent from this week's discussion. We're going to be talking about them next week and just doing a little state of the DC Union as we approach, finales and wrap ups. And we've had a crossover announcement, which I left out of the news for this week. We've had crossover directors. We have Diggle on. We have David Ramsey directing. We've got a bunch of kind of cool and interesting stuff to discuss. And we also have The Flash. Not cool and interesting, but in the universe regardless. So we're going to be talking about that next week, regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern. And with that, I then go back to the love and marriage and complexity discussion and transition that into Married at First Sight. Okay, so we had the Married at First Sight finale. Importantly, it was here in Atlanta. So we're talking Georgia couples, okay? Most of my predictions were right. I got one wrong, and the one that I got wrong was the one that hated each other more than probably anybody else in the world. So there's two couples where the love and in love thing was not going in the right direction. Couple number one, just a full on mess. I feel like the guy was a performative sociopath. He said a bunch of awful things about her behind her back, said good things to her face, strung her along, basically emotionally abused her, got a whole other woman pregnant prior to the show. Just like an absolute mess. But they would not like leave each other. Like no matter what crap was going on, he would still find a way to reel her in. She would still find a way to keep trying for this. Like they continued this and he would make statements like, oh, I can't get too close to you because I'm afraid I might fall in love with you, like all of this sort of stuff. So that's one toxic version. Then we had another version where this guy, he was like, I don't know, they're both like early 30s, whatever. He's never told anybody he has loved them. Never once. He's like, the L word is too serious. Like he's talking like a high schooler this entire time. And so they go through the entire thing. They get married. He won't say he loves her. They move in together. He won't say he loves her. They get to decision day where they like within the show they agree to like either get married or stay divorced. They agree to get married. They agree to stay married. Sorry. He still hasn't said he loves her. They show up at the 6 month later checkup. He still hasn't said he loves her. Finally, the host kind of got it out of him, but I was just like, that's like a prime example. And by the way, I did not like this couple at all, even though I am like an actions over words kind of blah, blah, blah. But I didn't like them because he was such a juvenile person about this one tiny thing. Like, how do you marry, move in, stay with somebody for months and months and months? They're planning like a second wedding together to like re-celebrate this, all of that. And he wouldn't even tell her he loves her. Like, boggled the mind, the level of out of touchery. I wanted them to break up. They didn't break up. I did predict they'd stay together, but I almost count it as a loss based on how much I wanted them to break up. The one that really frustrated me was a couple that hated each other, did not agree to stay married, barely even lived together for most of the experiment. And I could not for the I could not for the life of me figure out why they didn't get along. I don't dislike either one of them. I thought they were both like really interesting and quirky and funny, and they despised each other. And it was the funniest thing because like they'd be sitting in these like interviews with like the therapist or the host or whatever, clearly like opposite sides of the couch, like as far away as possible. You couldn't twist a knife in them to get them to compliment each other. But the second either one of them would say the slightest thing to like annoy or irritate the other, they'd like start turning to each other and just like overreact and like there was clearly some kind of like feeling there. And it was so frustrating because like at every second I expected them to turn into like enemies to lovers, because I'm like, y'all are like, there's something too much going on here. Like there's too much tension, there's too much like every little like joke or this or that was turning them into this little like bicker fest. And when they would bicker, Kate, it was like something out of like a bad rom-com. They'd be like looking at each other and like kind of tuning out everybody else and making these like sarcastic little comments. I'm like, what are y'all going what do you have going on? What is this? Like, do you like do you need to go into a room somewhere? Like, what is the deal? Anyways, they didn't agree to stay married. I guess they do actually despise each other. I just want to know if they've ever considered enemies to lovers. Like, has anybody approached them with that storyline?
Are you okay?
No.
The thing is, like, I am fully on the train of enemies to lovers in fiction, and I kind of stand on the belief that Jane Austen is the closest thing to fully fiction, or closest of fiction that is to real life that I've ever seen. So like she can sell me on like that form of enemies to lovers where it's more just like I don't understand you and I don't hate you, but we're close to hating each other. And then understanding comes through and like it all clicks. But like actual enemies that they know each other well enough to actually hate each other, I'm like, I don't see how that happens, but it makes for good television.
It really does. Carrie says, Cammie, you need a text to talk function. I really do. These last couple days of having a cough is really like messing with my typical daily flow of just like talking nonstop in all situations. This isn't working out with me as a person, but it is a good reminder for me to transition to Kate's section of what she watched this week / read / whatever. Again, after Kate, we'll end with A Quiet Place. Very short. Probably won't have too many spoilers, but I'll give you a heads up when we get to there. Kate, take it away.
Okay, nice transition. So I don't remember if I had finished reading it by the last time we talked, but I finished reading Crooked Kingdom, which is the final book in the Six of Crows duology. Highly recommend. It's my favorite book out of the series so far. It Didn't make me cry, but I really got emotionally invested because I liked all those characters, so it was really moving. Then I mentioned earlier I read Mysterious Benedict Society. Sorry, it's a trilogy, and I've read the first one now. And that was really good. It was definitely aimed towards like a younger person, probably like 15, more like 13. Um, but it does a really good job where it shows and tells, which is something you definitely need for like that demographic, and it shows much better than a lot of adult novels I've read before. Like you understand what's going on, and then it just kind of repeats it for the people that are too young to kind of pick up on clues. But it's this really fun, like kind of like spies, kind of vigilantes almost, but they all have these. They're all four incredibly smart, but they have their own specific skills aside from being smart. Specifically, like Kate is, I mean, she carries a red bucket, so she just has a bunch of tools, and she's like the Inspector Gadget of the group, and she always has the tool and the physical way of fixing the problem. There's other ones, but I kind of once you start explaining them, you start revealing too much. But that one is a fantastic book, 5 out of 5 stars. And then I read another 5 out of 5 stars book called Daisy Jones and the Six, and that one is
I've
set.
heard of this.
If you want to read it, I have a hard copy.
Yes.
But it is fantastic. So it's set in the 1970s, and it unfolds through transcripts of interviews. So it's like stitched together interviews of all the different people associated with the story, just telling like small little snippets at a time to the interviewer. And it's like about a fictional band, highly based on Fleetwood Mac, but they have their own story about how they come together, how they reach the top, and how they fall apart. And it has a fun twist at the end. Well, no, it's fun. Writing wise, it's nice. It's a nice twist. That wasn't shocking, but it really tied the whole story together, which was really fun. And now I plan on reading that author's other books. So highly recommend that one too.
That sounds really
Then
good.
I watched, yeah, it was really good. Superman and Lois, but we will talk about that one next week, I guess. And then I watched 1 or 2 more episodes of The Good Doctor, and then I saw clips on YouTube, how it always gives me, recommending this show called 911. You watched Lone Star, right?
I did, yeah.
So I've watched now 3.5 seasons of the first show this one.
Wow.
Yes.
I never actually watched the original, but I've heard there's some good ships in it.
It's good ships because they're like, you know, when they just write a good ship and there's genuinely good drama, but it's not because like they just can't communicate. Like there's actual things going on in everybody's life that they have to work through together. That's the drama we're working with, which is good quality writing. Also, I like all of the characters, which is really weird. And my favorite character is actually a guy, which I was like, what? I know, but it was what got me into it. So he is, if you're familiar with the term a himbo.
Yes, I am.
Okay, he is the good-natured but sometimes misguided himbo, and later we are introduced to his sister, and they are my 2 favorite characters. And I still love everybody else too.
I'll have to bump that up on my list, especially since I've watched some of 911 Lone Star.
Yeah, that one's really good. And it also, because of the nature of the show, deals with like some politics and stuff. And we've like mentioned before, we get really tired of heavy-handedness. But even for a show set in modern times, it handles that so much better than 99% of the shows out there.
Good. Okay. I
That
have
was, I think that
I
was it.
have noticed, and I like it, not for good or for bad, but I have noticed in the DCCW shows the slight rise of subtlety, I guess I'll say. I want to say the slight rise of originality when it comes to like political themes. I will say The Flash is something of the exception so far, but just in terms of like not just being like, okay, here's this political thing that we need to talk about. We're just going to change names and shove it into our story, but basically do the exact same thing. I've noticed a little bit of subtle subtlety and originality increasing, and it makes me hopeful that the wave of shows that I really feel like were well meaning, but kind of were just like, oh, it's cringy. Do we have to do it that way? I'm with you, but do we have to do it that way? I feel like the wave of those shows is going to evolve a little bit into a little bit more like an actual original story that fits with their characters, that might be communicating some moral or message that is important.
Yeah, we can only hope for the CW right now.
Anything else from this week that you watched?
No, I have started a new book. It's I'm pretty early into it, but all I really can say is basically they're going. So it's a series of books. I know that, and they're all about women named Jane. So
Ooh.
the first one is about Lady Jane Grey, but they've twisted history. So there's also magic, and there's certain people that when they experience strong emotions turn into animals. So King Henry VIII would turn into a lion,
Ah,
and the man that she's going to have to marry is forever a horse. So that's what we're working
interesting.
with right now.
So furries. I'm kidding.
So sorry. It wasn't something I was expecting when I opened the book. It just kind of happened.
It's always something you stumble upon if you're around long enough. Okay, we only have a few more minutes. I did want to mention A Quiet Place really quickly, and just some thoughts on that. Quiet Place 2. I would say this is probably mostly non-spoilery, but I have not actually seen A Quiet Place 1. Have you seen A Quiet Place 1?
No, but I know a lot about what happens in a quiet place with them.
Okay. So in A Quiet Place 1, I went through, I read all the plot points. I knew who lives and dies. I knew the tone. I knew all of that. And going into like tone, pun intended. Going into the second one, I had reasonably like high expectations. Obviously, this is like a award-winning movie with really good people. You know, it was so it was so good, but it the thing that I found most, I'll say, surprising, I guess, was how in this type of genre, I almost kind of lump it in with any kind of like post-apocalyptic thing that might have like zombies or some sort of, monster
Yeah.
species taking over the earth, whatever, where I just expect people will die for shock value potentially at any point. And if you think in terms of like acts in a movie, act one, act two, act three, you expect, okay, there might be a near death in act one, there might be a death in act two, and then there might be like emotionally shocking, whatever, death in act three, and or whatever, flip those around, but there's kind of that pace throughout. And based on the description in the first movie, I know that there are deaths, they seem to occur in the second or third act. So the way I was on the edge of my seat through like every potentially dark moment. And I'm not saying there are deaths and I'm not saying there aren't deaths. Somehow they maintain that tension throughout and never actually use a human death as the like shocking plot point. And it makes me want to go back and watch the first movie because I'm like, they had in the first movie, spoilers for the first movie, in the first movie they have a tragic death of a child in what seems to be about act 2 of a main child, and they have a heroic but tragic death of a main character adult in the third act. And at every moment, I was just expecting something like that to happen, and that be like the emotionally moving point. And that just was never, it's not that it did or didn't happen. It was just, it was never the emotionally moving point. In fact, the deaths that we do see are almost like scene closers and you move on to the next thing. And I'm so curious about that tone switch. I've been thinking about it like since I saw the movie on, I guess it was Sunday, whatever, of how different the um the plot movement is around death, the potential of death, and places where somebody may or may not die. That's all. Carrie says, interestingly enough, I watched Kill Bill 2 before I watched the first, and that didn't ruin it. Yeah, this didn't ruin the first one for me, but I personally am mostly pro spoilers. In some cases where I don't want spoilers, that's like when I am going to watch something live, or I will go watch it like the day it comes out in theaters. But if there's been any amount of time since something's come out and when I'm watching it, I tend to be of the mindset of like, if it's really good, a spoiler won't hurt it. There are some obvious exceptions. Like I think The Good Place is best watched without initial spoilers if you possibly can anymore these days. Um, I think The
I watched it
Village.
without having a clue what it was about. So
What now?
I watched The Good Place without having a clue what it was about. So I think there's some people that can get away with it.
Yes, that's the spirit. The Village, the old M. Night Shyamalan movie from like the early aughts.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really good example of one that if you can, it's best to watch without spoilers. But most of the time, I think most genres of movies and certainly most television shows should kind of be able to stand up to spoilers and still be good if they are spoiled. I do feel like there was I'm gonna die. I do think that there was a Village Easter egg in A Quiet Place 2. No spoilers, but Carrie, when you watch it, let me know if you think at any point there is a Village Easter egg. He says, for me, billions watching the first one, the theater totally quiet, added to the drama. Does the second one really rely on silence as much as the first? I'm going to say no. Having not seen the first, I strongly get the sense that there is simply a lot less silence in the second one. There are some flashbacks in the second one which don't have silence or rely on silence. And there are a few settings in the second one that don't necessitate silence. There is obviously several parts, the tense parts, where they might be overheard or tracked, where there is silence necessary, but I I don't think it's quite as much as what you probably saw in the first, based on what I read of the plot. And also, I was in a theater where there was some people in the front who would not shut up, but it was fine. All right, next next week, guys. If I survive until then,
If she makes it.
if I make it, when I am dragged kicking and screaming across the health finish line, we are going to have a DC State of the Union. I'm going to figure out how to get all three of us on screen at the same time, or I'll rotate the three of us out. I do know how to get all three of us to be able to see each other at the same time. I'm not sure if I can get those watching to be able to see all three of us at the same time, but we're going to figure it out. We're going to get a stunning catch up on Legends of Tomorrow from Carrie, wherein he's going to explain to us why we should love ourselves and watch Legends of Tomorrow and stop watching and complaining about The Flash. I will begrudgingly catch everybody up on The Flash and try to think of some positives. That's my task. And then all three of us can talk about Superman and Lois. And I don't know if either of you watch Supergirl, but we'll catch up on that too. But Superman and Lois, I have some nice things to say. I can be a good person when it comes to that show so far. I have a few complaints as well, but we'll get into it next week. Until then,